Disney's experimental era, where they did a bunch of weird stuff that was new and interesting until it wasn't. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you know what the Disney eras are. But for all of you people with social lives, someone somewhere figured out that you could divide the Disney original animated movies into eras. And I'm gonna tell you what they are now. Golden Age, absolute classic, revolutionary for animation, and a really boring slog to get through. Also the encapsulation of fear itself. Wartime era. I have not seen nor care about any of these movies. Come at me. Silver Age. Solid, classic movies that still hold up in so much as I can watch them in their entirety in one sitting, as long as I can play Tetris on my phone. Bronze Age. There's at least one movie in this period that you love.
Smile, everyone.
And the others are okay too, I guess. Renaissance. Absolute bangers. These are the all-stars that have stood the test of time, even without nostalgia goggles. Experimental. Now that they've mastered the art of cinema, they went and did a bunch of sometimes awesome, probably weird creative shit, before eventually being diluted to Pixar light. Revival era. Money. Point being, after essentially perfecting the animated movie, the experimental era gear shifted hard into doing a bunch of new genre stuff. They went in a lot of different directions, and the results were some really original and interesting movies. But I think by far the weirdest of them is... this movie's got everything. It's about an ancient Peruvian emperor who gets turned into a llama, which is just such a random animal to begin with, but it's also a meta-comedy that shifts gears more than a YouTube playlist compiled by a drunk monkey in a top hat. And it's all held together by John Goodman wearing a poncho, whose character's name is, get this, Pacha. In terms of genre, it borrows from too many things to really fit in any category. Just to get at the tip of the random bullshit iceberg, the intro is a Broadway musical. This sequence is a vibe. There is an American diner in ancient Peru. Plus the protagonist talks like a one-off character in Friends.
Sure.
Honestly, this movie should not work.
Doesn't make any sense. Too bad.
It's trying to be too many things at once. The plot and characters are pretty basic when you think about it.
Yeah, basic.
And it should just be a terrible mess.
It's devastating.
But it isn't. It pulls you into this weird nonsensical world and ends up being a really creative, genuinely funny movie that's constantly interesting. And a big part of why this movie works is because they commit to the bit. The bit being a masterclass in having everything be a ridiculous, uber-stylized version of itself. This includes seemingly irrelevant tangents, big art choices, and straight up breaking the fourth wall. The meta jokes alone were really off-brand for a Disney animated movie at the time. Sure, now, 20-ish years later, it's not really a big deal because Hollywood consumes and burns out everything it can in a never-ending cycle of mutually assured destruction spurred by the capitalistic hellscape we live in. But at the time, it was pretty cool. Yeah, the genie's a thing, but he's an anomaly in an otherwise normal movie. And like the genie, other movies might have one or two of these random genre subversions just to spice things up. But this movie has meta written into its DNA.
I had a dream that Dad was tied to a log and was careening out of control down a raging river of death.
Right off the bat, it gets into the bit in every way it can.
Now see, that's a little too far back.
And the movie rarely stops.
Don't tell me. We're about to go over a huge waterfall.
Yep.
Sharp rocks at the bottom?
Most likely.
Bring it on.
The key thing being keeping the bit going without it getting exhausting.
Never go full retard.
Which they do by having snippets where the movie slows down and occasionally just letting it be a Disney movie. But also keeping the audience on their feet by not slowing down for too long.
Go!
Teach your audience to expect the unexpected, and you can do whatever you want, as long as you stay inconsistent.
Just one more for exotic bird bingo.
That being said, just because the audience is aware that the movie exists in this hyper-stylized world, doesn't mean they'll necessarily like it. Because it's really easy for a movie as gimmicky as this to get real annoying real fast. To counter this, you need some concrete foundations to build the wacky stuff on. Which is why in this movie, almost every awkward cutaway, random trope, and stylistic exaggeration either moves the plot forward or builds up the characters. An interesting thing here being that the plot/characters and the style of this movie has this symbiotic, codependent thing going on. The style needs a solid plot and characters because style alone is just empty noise. And the plot/characters are honestly really basic, so they need the style to keep things interesting. At the same time, the plot and characters need to be simple so that the style can do really weird stuff with them and have it still be comprehensible. So let's look at the main characters. Speaking of style-surfing characters, the one point of this entire Broadway intro sequence is to get across that this guy is a self-centered ass who thinks the world revolves around him.
I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove.
That's it. No complicated world building or foreshadowing, it's just, this guy's the Emperor, and he's a selfish prick. And when he starts talking, he sounds like a fucking yuppie.
You're being let go, your department's being downsized, you're part of an outplacement. We're going in a different direction, we're not picking up your option.
Complete with the whole gentrification corporate speak thing.
Pool?
Booyah! Welcome to Kuzco-topia, my ultimate summer getaway, complete with water slide.
And they really don't hold back on how much this guy sucks.
When I give the word, your little town thingy will be bye-bye. Bye-bye.
But the audience still ends up being able to root for him because they put him next to...
This is Yzma, the Emperor's advisor.
If Kuzco is the selfish asshole you don't really like, Yzma is the devil. Just design-wise, she looks like a classic villain. Like, you know, Darth Maul. These characters are just designed to be very obvious, villainous villains. And this is one of the times the movie chooses to lean on Disney tropes, with the whole evil advisor being the villain thing, and then it turns it up to 11. This scene with the hammer is just a great example of a ridiculous cartoony trope that doesn't make sense, but still works in the context of the movie.
A little to the left.
And then there's the whole...
Pull the lever, kronk.
And also the...
Keep your arms and legs in at all times.
It's just a fantastic bit of unnecessary storytelling on the side. The whole funeral bit is the ultimate representation of what an unapologetic villain she is. Like, so off the handle that you love to hate her type stuff. It's all just an extreme version of Disney tropes, because that's what the movie is sometimes. And to round off the three weird-ass, uber-stylized palace characters is Kronk. Just like the other characters, Kronk is based on a generic trope, the villain's sidekick. But the twist is, instead of being a bumbling dumbass, he can literally do everything.
Sample is a basket of liver and onion rings, a catch of the day, and a steak cut in the shape of a trout.
3 oinkers wearing pants, plate of hot air, basket of grandma's breakfast, and change the bull to a gill. Got it.
He's basically the ultimate Chad. And he's just a pure soul who gets along with everyone.
I was a junior chipmunk, and I had to be versed in all the woodland creatures. Please continue.
It's so odd how he's so loyal to this obviously evil person. But the movie can burst that away with,
Every decade or so, she gets a new one.
because nothing matters. Also, I just love that when he speaks with the squirrel, when they were recording that, instead of doing like animal noises, they decided to just go with
Squeaky, squeaker, squeaking.
And the reason these three can be completely batshit without the movie devolving into an incomprehensible shit show is Pacha. These three are the most extreme versions of their respective tropes, but Pacha is the opposite of that. He sticks to being a more basic Disney protagonist. He's an ordinary guy with real problems the audience can relate to, who lives in a small but scenic country village with adorable kids and a pregnant wife.
But we love each other, right, honey?
In fact, he's such a trope that it's almost ironic. He's playing the straight man not just for the other characters, but for the stylistic bullshit of the movie itself. A great example of the movie using a comedic thing as a character building tool is Kuzco's commentary.
That guy was an emperor. A rich, powerful ball of charisma. Oh yeah!
Yeah, not narration, full-on DVD commentary. You know the stuff they put in the extras part of DVDs, or what, Blu-rays? Wait, does the extinction of physical media mean that commentaries just aren't a thing anymore? Huh. Point being, narration is supposed to blend in, but this completely throws that premise out the window.
Hi, excuse me. 2 seconds here.
It's full-on director's notes, him drawing on the movie and pointing things out with a marker stuff. Finally, the commentary comes back one last time, 3 layers deep.
I didn't do anything, and they ruined my life and took everything I had. Hey, give it a rest up there, will ya?
Narratively, this bit has the important purpose of showing Kuzco's character growth.
They saw the whole thing, they know what happened.
But it's also probably the most meta thing in the movie, which is some real trippy Inception, John Malkovich, Stranger Than Fiction stuff. God, it's so good. Speaking of narrative devices,
Allow me to shed some light on the subject.
The movie is so committed to the bit that they've taken the generic morality tale plot and boosted it into this eccentric version of itself. This movie does not give a shit about straying away from conventional continuity. Instead, major plot points are strung together by weird character motivations, epiphanies, and side tangents.
Is that my voice?
The entire premise is reliant on Kuzco being turned into a llama, and only happens because
Your poisons all look alike. You might think about relabeling some of them.
in a normal movie, this would just make the audience check out and call bullshit. But when your entire movie is built on the premise of weird bullshit go, the audience just rolls with it.
I've been turned into a cow. Can I go home?
You're excused.
In fact, it all makes the movie better, because the weird bits aren't just comedic one-offs, they drive the story forward. Okay, we need to get these characters from point A to point B, and instead of a boring conversation that doesn't serve the style,
Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
they just shoehorn explanations and sequences that aren't very naturalistic, but do serve the style.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Oh well, back to business.
Kronk's entire character arc is played out through comedic bits.
I've never liked your spinach puffs. Never!
And it doesn't feel lazy, it feels like a stylistic choice. There's 100 ways to explain every narrative leap of faith,
For the last time, we did not order a giant trampoline. You know, pal, you could have told me that before I set it up.
but they chose to link them together with these nonsensical segments and throwaway lines.
I win.
The style feeds the plot and vice versa.
What are the odds that trapdoor leading me out here?
Let me just talk about the diner for a sec. Narratively, the whole point of this sequence is so Pacha finds out Yzma wants to kill Kuzco, and Kuzco doesn't believe him, so they do a Frodo and Sam. At its most basic, this could have been a 3-minute scene of them bumping into each other in the jungle. But instead, the diner sequence is a literal revolving door of mini-jokes, sketches, and Buster Keaton-style gags. And it doesn't feel off because these tangents are the point of the movie. I could go on and on about the other ways this movie stands out, like the iconic scene design, or how they sneak in these really smart and well-written sidelines.
How could he do this to me? Why, I practically raised him.
Yeah, you think he would have turned out better.
Yeah, go figure.
But that would take all day. The defining aspect of this movie is having everything be this uber-stylized version of itself. Theoretically, it should be an all-style, no-substance, exhausting compilation of random vibes. But it's not, because almost every weird side bit is an important part of the characters and the story. And they made something unique not only for Disney, but just movies in general. Which, I think is really cool.